Well, welcome. We are here on another Tuesday night, ready to spend some time in the Word. I will just preface this by a couple of things. We are having weather. We are having thunderstorms here, so again, if things cut out, if all of a sudden we just drop out, give us a couple of minutes, we'll be back up because our generator will have kicked in and we'll be back up and running. But it's just it takes a few minutes. The other thing is this: we're in Proverbs and we're going to continue our journey through Proverbs. I'm going to take a different approach. I know, especially last week, I started to notice this. There is, like I've said before, Solomon deals with just maybe seven or eight things, and he just kind of attacks them from a different viewpoint, a different perspective. He's trying to make sure he has his son's attention, who he's writing to. He has people's attention who are going to be following this. Proverbs was written for everybody. The book of Proverbs was written for everybody. So Jenny and I were talking about this and talking about the repetition and how he seems to, in one way or another, go back and maybe in a little bit different way make the same point over and over again. And that can get, I don't want to say boring, but that can get dull. And I kind of felt that last week, and I've noticed on the lack of comments and things like that you guys might be getting drained by all of this. So as Jenny and I were talking about this and talking about the reasons that Solomon keeps making these points over and over again, we both agree that it's because we're a thick-headed people and we haven't learned our lessons, and really not much has changed since this was written. Since the Proverbs were written about 3,000 years ago. We haven't gotten any better. These lessons that are contained in this book apply to life today. But what I'm going to do, instead of going verse by verse and reading everything and trying to make comments on each verse, is I'm going to give, I did my best to do a synopsis on kind of each chapter, and we're going to take a bigger bite of the apple. And I'll give you a synopsis of the chapter, and then I'll talk about one or two verses or one or two things, and there's some things that jumped out at me as I was reading them. If you have any questions about something that is contained in the chapter or in any of the things we're covering, please send them. We will talk about them. Okay? So my goal over the next couple of weeks is to take 5 or 6 chapters each week, and we'll be done with Proverbs in 3 weeks, and then we're going to jump to something else after this. So, we left off in Proverbs 15. Now, Proverbs 15 overall, it looks at the contrast between wisdom and folly, between righteousness and wickedness. You know, that folly is just making those poor choices, making the bad decisions, in circumstances. And So in this section of what Solomon is saying, he talks about things like soft answers, how they diffuse anger. He talks about the power of words. And gosh, guys, you all know this. There is power in our words. And this is a common theme through Proverbs. And we'll hit this a couple of times tonight. In the power of words. He addresses in the chapter really God's oversight, the divine oversight, that the Lord, he says that the Lord observes all of the actions, both good and evil, and he reminds us that we are accountable. He talks about gentleness in our attitudes and our actions. He ends the chapter really with talking about parental wisdom. So again, it's a bunch of, we're in the middle of these sayings from Solomon that are just really short. You can take each statement and there's a life lesson in almost every statement. And so, like I said, I'm just going to pull a couple verses from each chapter, and my goal tonight is to get through chapter 19. So the next week is to get through chapter 25, and then the third week is to finish Proverbs. Okay, that's kind of the plan, so you know. So just strap in, and like I said, if you have a question, jump in and ask, okay? Like I said, he talks about answers. He talks about our words. And Proverbs 15 starts off with a gentle answer turns away anger, but a harsh word stirs up wrath. We need to not avoid speaking the truth, but we can do it in a way where mercy and kindness and compassion are very evident. I know that for a long time in my work history, I was a manager in several manufacturing facilities, and there were times you had to let people go, and it was always something that people dreaded, and I never liked having to take a person's job away from them. But I could sit down and have a conversation with them and explain why they didn't fit within what we were asking them to do. And there was all but maybe just a couple of times that people walked away with understanding, always ended with a handshake. So there's that. That's what soft answers are about. Like I told you about this divine oversight, Proverbs 15:3 says, the eyes of the Lord are everywhere, observing the wicked and the good. He knows what's going on. If you don't think God knows, he knows. God knows. But there's a statement in here, there's a verse in here that it shakes me, and it's the same thing that shakes me, and we're going to get into this for just a second. Proverbs 15:8 says this, the sacrifice of the wicked is detestable to the Lord, but the prayer of the upright is his delight. Now that may not sound like much, but think of it, and where I really draw the parallel to this is to what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount. And let me just jump there real quick. In the Sermon on the Mount, he said a couple of things that to me are very shaking. Matthew 7:14 says this, how narrow is the gate and difficult the road that leads to life, and few find it. How many people do you know are kind of fooling themselves, say, hey, I'm a good person, I'm okay. I don't need that religion you're talking about. I definitely don't want a relationship with Jesus. I don't want anybody telling me what to do because I'm good enough on my own. They're really fooling themselves. But here's the thing that's even worse than that. If you just go a little bit further in Jesus' words and pick it up in chapter 7, verse 21, Jesus says this, that these words, they can keep you up at night if you don't understand your relationship with Jesus Christ and what grace is about. But here's what Jesus says. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name and drive out demons in your name and do many miracles in your name? Then I will announce to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you lawbreakers. Let me go back and read what Solomon said again. He said this, the sacrifice of the wicked is detestable to the Lord, but the prayer of the upright is his delight. There are people that don't have an active and a growing relationship with Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. And yet they think they're doing all the right things, but they think that the things they're doing are proving how good they are and proving that they have this relationship. And the proof isn't in the action. The actions are because of the proof of understanding what grace is and what God's love is. And you say, Rick, that's semantics. No, it's not. You can't earn your way to heaven. So the sacrifice of the wicked, the sacrifice of the sinner, the sacrifice of the one who doesn't have that right relationship with our Lord, it means nothing. It's not about effort. It's about grace. So, we need to take things like this serious. Solomon goes a little further and he says this. He says, plans fail where there is no counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. You need to have people in your life that can speak into your life. You need to have people in your life that if you're wrestling with something or you have something on your mind, that you can bring it to the table and talk about it. That's what this is about. This is why we do what we do. And lastly, he says in this chapter, the fear of the Lord is what wisdom teaches, and humility comes before honor. And he talks about this fear. We'll see it. We'll see the statement several times in these 5 chapters. But the Hebrew word that is used here for fear, and is used all through the Old Testament, it's yirah. Y-I-R-A-H, yirah. And really what it means, and it points to trembling, it points to a very seriousness, but it really means awe or reverence or reverent worship. It means a magnificent reverence of understanding who God is. It's not that we're supposed to be scared of God. We're not supposed to be trembling in our boots because he could wipe us off the face of the earth. We are supposed to be in awe of who he is. I had one time in my life, and I've always been a pretty good boy. Let me tell you this. I had one time in my life I was called on to be a character witness for a person, and I was called to federal court in California, to a district court. This was a big deal, and I mean, when the judge walked in the room, I mean, I was overwhelmed. It was really not just awe-inspiring, but I was shaking in my boots to be in a circumstance, a situation like that. And I had done nothing wrong, but man, you see those things and you see that the authority and the reverence you want to pay the person because of the position that they're in. And so I kind of got a glimpse of what that fear of the Lord is in that. So let's continue on to chapter 16. Chapter 16 really emphasizes the importance of aligning our plans with God's purposes. It highlights, again, things that Solomon is dwelling on. It's tending to highlight the themes of wisdom, of humility, and of righteousness. And some of the things he says in there, he talks about human plans versus divine purpose. He says, while we as people may have plans, it's God that examines the outcome, or determines the outcome. And, and then he goes on to talk about the weight of our actions. People think that they're doing good, that they're doing the right thing, that our actions are pure and they're good. But what's the heart behind them? God knows that. What's the motivation behind that? Is there a manipulation there? God understands that and God sees that. He talks in the chapter about committing your work, your efforts to the Lord, and when you do that, your plans are, as he refers to, established. In other words, your plans, if they're committed to the Lord, they're going to fall in line with God's purpose. Do you guys remember, or do you really truly understand what God's purpose is in your life? Jesus gave us the task of being a disciple who makes other disciples. And what that means is you invest in others. You love others just as you've been loved. See, it's all wrapped up in love. It's not wrapped up in a list of do this or don't do that. It's wrapped up in wanting to help people find what's best for them, to see what's best for them. And so when we talk about aligning with God's purposes, that's what we're talking about. Solomon also in this chapter talks about consequences. He really warns throughout this chapter against pride and arrogance. And he really emphasizes that humility does lead to honor. And again, he talks about that God's aware. He's sovereign. He talks about he's aware and he acknowledges everything, but he understands too what the wicked are doing. And again, God's authority, his sovereignty assures that his plan, his purpose will come to pass, no matter what we think. We're going to hear this a couple of times in these 5 chapters, but 16:2 says, a person's ways seem right to him, but the Lord weighs the motives. And then understand this, God knows, and I'm going to talk about this for just a minute because there's a passage in Romans that this really refers to. It says this, the Lord has prepared everything for his purpose, even the wicked for the day of disaster.
What's that reference, Rick?
Where I'm going?
Yeah.
It's Romans 9.
Thank you.
It'll be Romans 9 in the middle of the chapter. If you remember when we were in Romans, chapters 9 through 11 really dealt with Israel's rejection of Christ. And in the middle of chapter 9, Paul talks about that God's selection of choosing to minister not just to the Jews but to the Gentiles is just. And picking it up in verse 19, it says this. He says, you will say to me, therefore, why then does he still find fault? For who resists his will? Paul goes on to say, on the contrary, who are you, a human being, to talk back to God? Will what is formed say to the one who formed it, why did you make me like this? It's a great question. Will the creature say to the Creator, why'd you do this to me? Don't you think God has a plan and a purpose in all our lives? Some of those things that we struggle with, some of those insecurities that we have, some of those things that we don't like. Really, it's God who made us and God who designed us. So, anyway, he goes on to say this in verse 21. Or has the potter no right over the clay to make from the same lump one piece of pottery for honor and another for dishonor? God can do what he chooses. And what if God, wanting to display his wrath and to make his power known, endured with much patience objects of wrath prepared for destruction? You know, one of the things, and I think I can say this without offending her, one of the things that Jenny really struggles with is people that come up and ask her questions about what she's going through and her condition, and they want answers. And every time there's a group of people that see her, they say, well, are you getting a little bit better? And that's such a hard question to answer, because she's not, the things that she's dealing with are long-term things. And even if she says, no, I'm struggling with this, well, God can do anything. It's not that she doesn't believe God can do anything. What if God's plan was for her to have to spend the rest of her life in a wheelchair, and in that show others what honoring God in the middle of suffering is really like? But see, people can't get their heads around that. They don't like that explanation. And it's really hard to understand sometimes. It's hard to accept, wait, God, I've prayed to you, I've come to you, I've asked you, you know what? Why? Well, the Lord has prepared everything for his purpose. That means that big problem that you're facing, that struggle that's going on, God knows. He's not surprised by it. And so, in that, his plan of revealing love and grace and compassion is going to be accomplished.
Rick?
Yeah.
Iman writes that these are difficult verses for me. It's so hard for me to wrap my mind around the fact that God created some people to be destroyed.
Okay. I understand what you're saying, Yvonne. I think that when creation happened, it wasn't God's plan for anything to be destroyed. But he understood what the repercussions of free will was going to be. So even before creation, I'll say it this week, I've said it before and I'll say it again, and I'll keep saying this. Even before creation, the cross was the plan. Because God, a holy, just, pure, and righteous Lord, determined that the shedding of blood was the debt that had to be paid for the remission of sins. And he determined that, and he revealed that all the way back in the garden. When Adam and Eve sinned, God didn't just disappear. What did he do? He sacrificed animals and made them clothes to cover their nakedness. So that was the first sacrifice. And it says in the Old Testament, it says in Hebrews too, that there is no remission of sins without the shedding of blood. There's no covering without the shedding of blood. We are covered by the blood of Christ. Yes, these are hard verses because it really shows the lengths that people will go to choose themselves, knowing that these choices are going to lead them to a place that, where somebody is maybe suffering and struggling with a physical condition, but their heart is right with God. And so it's a great testimony. But they're choosing self over that. Has anybody that's listening to me had the opportunity to even look at a YouTube video of Nick Vukovic? I've seen him in person in Buena Park. And here's somebody who you'd look at him and go, man, he has a lot to be angry about. He has a lot to be bitter about, but he is a true worshiper of the Lord. And so we have a choice to make. Even in the circumstances, in the difficult circumstances, we have a choice to make. There's a verse that we're going to be coming up on that says there's a way that seems right to a man, but that way ends in destruction. So when we're choosing self, we're choosing destruction. See, God is sovereign. Solomon says a little later in this, a person's heart plans his way, but the Lord determines his steps. God is sovereign. No matter what you're facing, God is going to determine your steps. So, and it says one of the really popular verses in here that we've heard, and I've heard sermon after sermon preached on, is verse 18, where it says, pride comes before destruction and an arrogant spirit before a fall. There's a lot. And then I told you about the verse 25, 16:25, that talks about really it really should drive you to a place of self-reflection, to look at those things that are going on and to know that God's got your back and God's in control in spite of the circumstances that may surround you. Some people I know are overwhelmed because of things that they're facing. And it makes sense that they're overwhelmed. And sometimes our way out is not God's way out. So the way that seems right to a person, which 16:25 says, should drive us to self-reflection. And one of those verses in here that old dudes like me love is verse 31. Gray hair is a glorious crown. It is found in the ways of righteousness. I guess I found a few things, huh? Just to make you smile and relax a little bit. So, we've gone through 15, we've gone through 16. We're jumping into 17. 17 really talks about more wisdom in relationships and the way we act, the way we conduct ourselves, and the value of peace over material wealth. He really starts off with a very powerful verse, and then talks about the value of peace. It says, better a dry crust with peace than a house full of feasting with strife. It's really a statement that, peace is more valuable than abundance. That conflict is a problem. Better to have a little and be at peace than have a lot and be in conflict. And it goes back to the thing I've said in a couple verses later. I've said it several times, and it's just a verse that is often misunderstood, but it's a verse that really could just say God knows. 17:3 says, a crucible for silver and a smelter for gold, and the Lord is the tester of hearts. God knows what you're facing. He knows what you're dealing with. He also knows that for us, relationships are important, and having harmony in the family, but harmony in our connections is essential. And in that we will find fulfillment. See, and we're going through this to gain wisdom. And see, once we gain that wisdom, once we start immersing ourselves enough in what God is telling us, we'll start to do things the way God does things. Being that reflecting mirror of Jesus Christ, we will do those things. And that brings us fulfillment. That brings us peace. But see, when we choose to do our way, it's really that folly, it's that foolishness. And there are consequences to that. One of the verses I really loved in 17 was Verse 9, which says, whoever conceals an offense promotes love, but whoever gossips about it separates friends. Can you keep a secret? Can you keep a struggle? You're really saving a life. You're really showing that you value the person if you can do that. He really wraps up chapter 17 by saying this. He says, the one who has knowledge restrains his words, and one who keeps a cool head is a person of understanding. One of the things I learned when I was going through some classes in the business world is that the higher up a person went, the more comfortable they were with silence. Sometimes it only takes a few words to answer a question. And yet if you keep talking and going on and on, you end up digging yourself a hole. See, real knowledge is giving a direct answer and letting that just lay. And not having to explain it, not having to justify it, not having to go round and round about it. And then the other side of that is this: can you keep a cool head when the pressure's on? That's something I continue to work on in my life, because a lot of times I do. Sometimes I don't. Chapter 18. Chapter 18 is more on wisdom in relationships, on wisdom in communication, on the consequences of our action. And in 18, he really addresses the danger of isolation. Again, he talks about the power of words. He talks about the importance of humility. And he talks about something that is very significant in here, and that's the name of the Lord. And we'll get to that in a minute. He starts off 18 by saying this: one who isolates himself pursues selfish desires. He rebels against all sound wisdom. We're not made to go it alone, people. Family, we're not. And I know this, one of the things that we value and we promote in the United States is this independence. We really do. We really believe in it. We really believe hard in it, and we lift it up. Instead, we should really be lifting up interdependence. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to need a hand. You're not less of a person because you need help or you need to help somebody. I know people, especially people who are struggling with problems, and you see this a lot in addicts, and I've counseled more than a few, that when they're doing their own thing, when they're struggling, when they're really battling their addiction, they want to isolate. They want to stay away from everything else and just feed the monster. But we do that in all kinds of ways. But that's not wise. We need that person to speak into our lives. We need that accountability. We need that person to show us love and compassion and understanding, because that's what God does for us. Jesus, in one of those passages I love in Matthew 11, says, "Come to me, all of you who labor and are heavy laden. Are you burdened? Are you struggled? Well, come to me and you'll find rest." He goes on to say, "Take my burden, take my yoke upon you, because my yoke is easy and my burden is light." I know people that are carrying some heavy, heavy, heavy things, and sometimes you look at them and I'm going, I don't know how you're carrying it. I don't know how you're doing it. And maybe you're doing it by being on your knees and nobody else knows. But if things are starting to crack, if things are falling apart, sometimes you need somebody else to help you hold the weight. See, true wisdom and true security are found in God. And that's really where verse 10 comes from in this chapter. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and are protected. Well, if you contrast this with what's said in verse 1, that one who isolates himself pursues selfish desires. In other words, saying, I can do it on my own. I can handle this. I got this. And yet, the righteous, the ones who are in a right bond, a right connection, a right standing relationship with God, run to Him. What is it you call God when you pray? Have you ever done a study on the names of God? Oh, there's lists and lists and lists of them. But He's Lord. He's Savior. He's Master. He's the answer to every problem, every circumstance, every question that we have. And when it's all fallen apart, the place to run is to run to Him.
Rick, I don't think it's just an American thing to feel like I'm independent, I gotta do this on my own, I have to prove myself. How do we get past that? How do, you've heard some of the phone conversations I've had this week, people that are struggling with, I can't accept gifts, I can't take from anybody else even if it's offered as a gift, I can't rely on anyone else, it's by myself. That's not just a U.S. attitude, but how do we practically break that down and get rid of that?
Okay, let me repeat what Jenny said because I know you can't hear her from the other room. She said she doesn't believe that that it's just a U.S. attitude about this independence, about this doing it on my own. And Jenny's right. She's been in several conversations this week with all kinds of people about they are just unwilling and have made statements. I can't accept help. I can't accept anything from anybody else. And she asked the question about how we get past that, how we grow beyond that. And it's understanding, I believe it's really understanding who we are and who God is. If I could do anything on my own and do it adequately, then the cross wasn't necessary. And I don't mean that to paint a picture that we're completely incapable, because God has given us gifts, and some things we can do we're pretty good at. But we don't cover the full scope of things. God knows everything that's going on, everything. He sees the results of every choice, every decision, everything that we make. And if we could learn to run to Him first, then when the answer presented itself in a way that we probably didn't expect, we wouldn't be so quick to reject it. See, it's really, I must say this, it's going to sound funny, but really the way to get past the independence and live in a way that we're interdependent is about understanding what humility really is. understanding that you're not less because you might not have the same or have less, or you have a struggle or a battle, but it's understanding that in your circumstance, in your situation, God can still be honored and glorified in your life. And it's a huge paradigm shift. One of the things it says in one of the references that I read, it says this. It says, humility and a sincere search for truth are common themes in this chapter. But it says God's name, meaning his character, his nature, and promises, is compared to a place of safety. In contrast, people often fool themselves into thinking that money or their own ability are reliable foundations. Not only should a person be humble in their personal life, but they should apply that same attitude toward matters of just judgment. Many claims sound convincing at first, only to fall apart under scrutiny. God's the one who examines. Didn't we just read that God determines our steps and he examines everything? He knows what's going on. Okay? So it is developing that attitude that help's not wrong. That needing help isn't a wrong thing to need. So, are there any other comments or questions I missed?
No, baby.
Okay, so I hope you all are tracking with me. We seem to be doing pretty good. Okay, we're to Proverbs 19. And Proverbs 19 is a very powerful chapter to me because it talks about value, and it talks about values that lie in character, not material possessions, and it really gives a lot of advice on living with integrity. Solomon talks about understanding the dynamics of wealth and relationships. So many people put value in money or those kind of things, and it minimizes relationships. And here's the real thing. It's not wealth, but it's what you do with the wealth. Are you generous? Or are you selfish? The chapter 19, as much as any other chapter, really truly applies to today. It starts off in chapter 19 talking about integrity. And that to me is important. I hope it's important to you too. It says, better a poor person who lives with integrity than someone who has deceitful lips and is a fool. There's true value in speaking honestly. Not being mean about it, speaking honestly with love and compassion and understanding. And you don't have to have a big checking account or a fat pocketbook to do that. In fact, if you have that choice, integrity or wealth, and you compromise your integrity for financial gain, that's a real problem. It's a real, honest deception. See, there's consequences of foolishness. A person's own foolishness leads him astray. Verse 3. Yet his heart rages against the Lord. People that make bad decisions blame God. God, why are you doing this to me? How many people have you heard say that? And they don't want to take responsibility for their choices, for their decisions. People want to blame God for everything instead of taking responsibility for the choices they've made. And here's the thing that we need to understand. God doesn't hate you because you've made a bad choice or even a foolish choice. There's forgiveness available. And understanding that means that we believe in God and we're going to run to Him and say, God, I need help again. For those of you that know me, and I'll just put it out there, for those of you that have known me for a while and known a lot of the challenges that I've dealt with in my life, know that one of the things that I've struggled with, because I don't hide the struggle, is anger. And sometimes I think I've got it, I'm doing well, and I've got a right perspective and everything else, but other times it rears its ugly head. And when it rears its head, I've got to step back and listen to those people that I depend on in my life, and then I've got to go to the Lord and work it out. And sometimes that working out is a lot of prayer and doing things, and other times it's saying, you know what, I need to talk to your counselor for a while. And some people are going to hear this and go, wait, Rick, you see a counselor? You pastor and you see a counselor? What's wrong with you? Are you defective? Yeah, huh? Yeah. I need help, and sometimes I need somebody else's wisdom to help me through some things. I don't want to be that foolish person that thinks I got the answer. See, the importance of wisdom is to seek knowledge and and gain understanding, gain that wisdom, and then to use that to live a disciplined life, a life of prayer, and to seek God's guidance and to live in that way. Sorry, I think I'm preaching about a lot of other things today. (19:8) says this, the one who acquires good sense loves himself. One who safeguards understanding finds success. This is what I'm talking about. If we're living that disciplined lifestyle, if we've got people in our lives that can speak into us, if we're trusting God in the times where things don't make sense, we're loving ourselves like God loved us, and that way we can love others. Verse 21 is just like 16:2 when we started this. Many plans are in a person's heart, but the Lord's decree will prevail. We can want to do all kinds of things, but really what's the thing that is going to be accomplished in life is God's plan. God's purpose is going to be accomplished. And then, like I said earlier, and this is where we're going to land tonight, and it's just another reminder that we're supposed to be kind and compassionate and understanding and caring for others, and we're supposed to be generous with what we've been blessed with. But that's this, and I said it earlier, and I'm going to say it once again. The fear of the Lord leads to life. And I love the promise that goes with this. One will sleep at night without danger. Are you in awe? Are you worshipful? Do you really understand what God has done for you? Do you understand how far grace reaches? I hope we're getting better at that. So we took a big bite of the apple tonight. We're going to take another big bite next week. We're going to pick it up in 20, and I'm going to try and get through all the way through 25 next week. That's the goal. That's what I'm planning for. So I hope I haven't overwhelmed you too much, and I hope because of what we've read, you've got some things to think about. I want to encourage you, even if you just do it for a month. We're coming to the end of this in a couple of weeks, and then we'll be rolling into June. To take a month and read one proverb a day. On the first, read the first proverb. On the second, read the second proverb. And so on. Read the proverb that corresponds with the day. And let it speak to you. And just do that for a month and see how you feel at the end of the month. you'll have read 30 or 31 Proverbs. And each one of them has some great things to say about life. And it really gives us something to think about. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your comments in here. We will continue to do this. Like I said, we're going to be here in Proverbs for 2 more weeks. So anyway, pray with me tonight, and we'll wrap this up, and then we'll get together on Saturday night. Okay? Precious Lord, Father, we are so grateful for your love. We're grateful for your wisdom. We're grateful for who you are. Because of who you are, we are becoming those people that you've purposed us to be. And in that we find contentment, we find peace in the middle of storms. And we know that we can trust your faithfulness. We know that we can trust your guidance. We know that we can trust who you are. Father, just strengthen us. Allow these words that we've covered tonight to just percolate inside us, and give us something to think about and something to bring to the table when we're talking to you. Keep refining in us the image of your Son, so we can shine as a light to this world that desperately needs it. There are so many around us that are going to hell, and what they need is just a demonstration of what grace really is, what your love really looks like. Help us live that out, Father. And in that we will do our best to honor and glorify you. This we pray in your precious name. Amen. Have a wonderful night, and we'll see you on Saturday night.
Rick, can you remind them that Facebook is taking down all
Okay. Jenny asked me to remind you. Jenny asked me to remind you that our things on Facebook are only staying up for 30 days. And then they're being taken down. That's the new Facebook policy. So please, 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 it's been in the last couple of weeks, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Every night, as soon as we're done, I upload the video onto YouTube. So you won't miss anything. And if you miss a live broadcast, you can pick it up on YouTube. All you got to do is go over to and find Walkworthy Church on YouTube and subscribe to the channel, and you'll get notifications when the new video is posted. Thank you all. We love you. Have a great evening.